Hello, everyone. We need to continue our discussion about Gregor Mendel and genetics. So, as a reminder, Gregor Mendel, he studied an organism called Pisum sativum. It's the garden pea, is all it is. And based on his work, he established the field of genetics. Now, unfortunately, he didn't know that. He passes away in the 1880s, and his work sits for about 20 years until a gentleman, British gentleman, named Reginald Punnett in the early 1900s, rediscovers Mendel's work, pulls it off the shelf. And Mendel explained everything in paragraph form, and Punnett provided this simple diagram, this square. You will become very familiar with that little square. And it totally changed how people understood Mendel's work. And so we call it the Punnett square in honor of Reginald Punnett. So we need to get some vocabulary and be sure that you're comfortable. So there's a trait. So what is a trait? A trait is a characteristic of an organism. Notice how it's a single trait. It's a characteristic of an organism. And then you have something called an allele. It's a fun word. And an allele is the different forms of a trait. So notice here that there are multiple alleles for every trait. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, let's make a little simple chart. Let's go trait, and let's go allele. So in our species, you have hair color. So in our species, there's brown, and there's blonde, and there's red. And people say, well, what about black hair? In our species, there's no such thing as black hair. If you take someone who appears like they have black hair and you put their hair underneath a microscope, it turns out that it's just really, really dense brown. Well, if you take a look at Pisum sativum, you might get the trait of flower color. Well, for them, the two alleles are the dominant purple and white. So there's always one trait, but there's many alleles. These are the different forms of the trait. So then when we were talking about the big R, and the big R, little r, there's of course vocabulary that's associated with that, always. So there's a term, zygous. And zygous means pair. And you know that all organisms carry their alleles in pairs. We get one allele from our biological mother, we get another allele from our biological father, and we carry our alleles in pairs. Fine. Well, if these pairs are the same, they are homo, because homo is the root meaning same. Whereas if this pair is different, that would be hetero. So you put these roots together and you get homozygous. Sounds fancy. It's not. Homo meaning same, and zygous meaning pair. This would be the same pair, as in big R, or little r, little r. This is a homozygous, and this is a homozygous. Well, how do you tell the difference between big R, and little r, since they're both homozygous? This would be homozygous dominant, while this would be homozygous recessive. All right, so that's when they're the same. What happens when they're different? Well, when they're different, that would be hetero, so it's a different pair. Therefore, it is heterozygous, literally meaning a different pair of alleles. This would be big R, little r. Now, what's cool about this individual is we refer to this individual as a carrier. Think back to that diagram that showed the first cross that Mendel did with the purple parent and the white parent, and all of the offspring were purple, but they carried white. They are a carrier of white. They are a heterozygote. So, what you see physically on the outside of the organism is called the phenotype. Pheno meaning physical. What do they look like physically? This is your physical appearance. Whereas what you carry in your DNA is referred to as your genotype. What do you carry in your genes? This is your genetic makeup. Of an organism. What is in your DNA? All right. Then we talked about the P generation. P for parents. Then the offspring we refer to as the F1 generation. This is the first filial. Filial is a fun word too. Filial meaning child or offspring. And then you have the F2 generation. Or the second filial. Now, most people don't say first filial and second filial. They just say F1 and F2. And then, of course, it goes on F3, F4, F5. And then, depending on how you want to look at this, you can separate this like such. Okay, so the P generation, this could be Dawn and I. Then the F1 generation would be M and her partner. And then their child, which would be our grandchild, get a load of that, would be the F2. So it's P, F1, and F2. So this is the vocabulary that we're going to start applying to the genetics problems that you see posted in our folder, and I will work through sample genetics problems with you. And if you struggle with those problems at all, then let's jump on the Google Meet and let's get some work done. Awesome. Talk to you guys soon.